self-gun. What? Gun. Oh. What? Like a handgun for personal protection. If somebody tries to mug you. What? What if your government tries to throw you in a can? What? You're gonna want a shotgun. Oh. What? An automatic rifle and a lot of ammo. Good.
Boys and girls, it is Tuesday. We are live. This is PrimerTime on UCY.tv. My name is Michael, and I am freshly showered, and I do not stink.
That's awesome. I'm Nick, and here we have a very special edition of PrimerTime. We've got some live guests with us on the line tonight. Michael, go ahead and do your intro.
Nick, I'm honored to have the Resistance Chicks, Leah and Michelle. I am kind of addicted to their YouTube, and I really agree with them on a lot of things, and I'm impressed. I really think they've got an awesome reach, and I'm honored to have them on. Ladies, please introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Leah.
We are happy to show. I'm used to seeing faces, so I have to be picturing your face.
Use your imagination
in my mind.
You got this.
But we're happy to be here.
It's a good thing we don't have pictures on our page.
I have a face built for radio.
Oh, come on.
But you're freshly showered.
You're clean. So for your listeners, Leah and I have a YouTube channel. It's called MasFaith3. It's spelled MasFaith 3. And we just kind of cover regular topics and news, but more or less focus on red pilling the world.
Yeah,
I think.
we like to say we don't lean left, we don't lean right, but we lean on the Word of God. So that's how we like to view things: liberty and justice.
But we're definitely more libertarian leaning than anything.
Yeah,
I guess if we have to put a label on.
Yes, students of Ron Paul. And,
That's good. Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? What are some of your interests outside of your interests in the news and what's going on with your channel? What are some of the things that you guys enjoy?
Okay, well, I think that we actually kind of try to live what we preach, in that we do take it seriously. Things like vaccines, factory farming, and so we grow our own food, pretty much most of our own food if we can.
We have a little urban or suburban farm where we raise heritage hogs and chickens, and we have a big garden, and we own our own business. We're pet sitters. So that's what we do full time, and that kind of takes up that. And now, since we launched Resistance Chicks in January, to our MasFaith3 channel. We already had a channel where we covered a lot of different topics, but this program that we did, it's kind of taken up we don't really have hobbies now anymore. This is our life.
That's because you guys have
research
responsibilities.
takes time.
Yeah,
Research
absolutely.
takes time.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. So it's trying to stay on top of all the latest developments, which is actually a very exciting time to be in any sort of politics or YouTubing right now. There's a new fight every day, and we're when Michelle and I started, we thought that we might be able to possibly make a living being YouTubers.
We were actually headed that way until YouTube censored us.
And we were headed that way, yeah. and then we got we have two channels, Resistance Chicks and MasFaith3. They mirror each other in case one gets shut down, and one did get shut down. Resistance Chicks for, I'm sure some Clintonites reported us or something.
So they attacked your ability to generate ad income.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
they actually
All right.
shut
So
down.
did they? What did they give you strikes for? Because we get, at UCY, there's strikes, and I mean we talk about things that are sensitive as well, and we've noticed that we've got, as generally as a group, that we've got less than a hearty welcome from YouTube. It's something you have to search for, and
we are not advertiser friendly.
We have been told we are not advertiser friendly.
Yeah. Our Resistance Chicks channel actually got taken down
for being fake news.
Awesome.
That's what we were told.
Yes.
We were told that we were fake news, and then it was funny because a couple weeks before, I don't know how much before, one of these really lefty liberal girls who we become really good friends with. Her name is Caitlin Johnstone. She shared one of our videos on
and wrote an article about
us. About the Syrian girl and Bana Alabed and the whole fake news with CNN, and we got all these liberal fans, hundreds of them,
which was very difficult.
And but I tell you what, when they found out our Resistance Chicks channel had been taken down, they just went to social media. Like I looked on 20 Bernie Sanders Facebook pages, it was shared. And I was like, well, it was Unite the Right and Left together.
But because of that, we've had Julian Assange tweet out some of our videos. And so it's been kind of humbling and interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Process.
That's pretty cool.
So we're sisters, by the way, for your listeners that do not know. If you can't tell,
we're sisters. We own a home. Our other hobbies would be remodeling. Michelle can wire anything. We remodeled our own house together, drywall, whatever you name it, we do it.
Plumbing.
You are your own Mexicans.
Yeah,
that's what we try to be.
That's a compliment.
We have been called Mexicans, and I do take that as a compliment.
So, if you guys wouldn't mind, really quickly, because we've steered a lot of our viewers here tonight for this show, and kind of give just a tiny background about you guys and your show, because we're obviously very pro Second Amendment at Resistance Chicks. So if you could tell them a little bit who you guys are, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, Nick and I are brothers. I'm the oldest brother. Nick is just a little bit younger than me, and he is what would be considered the good son. We are both, Nick, I would dare say, vehement. What would be the word you would use to describe that our love and our passion for the Second Amendment? Absolute.
I think you could just say passionate. I think you could say that and be safe in that.
It's a mindset that we've grown up with our entire life, and not necessarily as some sort of like replacement for anything lost in our lives. We realize the tool of liberty that the firearm is.
Yeah, not only that, one of the things that we've said in the past is that, speaking with you in before the show, is that being first generation Americans ourselves, we have family that comes from countries that had communism established while our families were living there. We understand what it means to be devoid of liberty and be devoid of the freedom to operate in any which way you so desire. Very, very few Americans actually understand what that means, and especially the folks who are out there espousing socialist ideologies. They themselves have never had to go cut sugarcane in the middle of the tropics in 80% humidity and 90-degree heat. That doesn't take.
And not only that, I mean, some of their idols. I mean, I dare say gods, the people that they spend $75 to have their face on a T-shirt. Number one, would cut the throat of anybody who spent $75 on a T-shirt, and number two, has his own words violate every principle that they claim to stand for. I'm referring to Che Guevara at this point. I mean, this is all a great big movement of acceptance and tolerance. And then Che Guevara, when asked, how does he view the Cuban black? And he basically said the Negro is indolent and lazy, prone to spend his money on drink and excess.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
When asked, what will the Cuban Revolution do for the average poor black in Cuba, he said it will do exactly what the average poor black has done for the revolution. Nothing.
Right. So,
and this is somebody who's on the T-shirt,
So, is your family then from Cuba?
So our grandfather, maternal grandfather,
extra communist fighting abilities. Our people played everybody in the past.
Not only do we stop at fighting communists, going a generation back to Spain, and from generations since the beginning, we have been removing kebab as long as we know.
Moving the merchant as well.
So the interesting thing is like I said, we have a unique perspective because of not only what we've had happen in our own family history and the struggles that our families have had to endure to make it through, and not only that, but to come to the United States and prosper. We understand with a greater sense of urgency, mainly due to the military service that we have throughout our family's history as well.
Uh-huh.
So that's something that, at least for me, is a part of my identity. I've said many years out of a 20+ year career overseas, with both combat deployments and then standard, 1 year short tour deployments. So I have a little bit different take on the world, and it takes me sometimes a little while to get back in the swing of things of viewing America in the average American's mindset, because I lose a year at a time whenever I go away, and things that might have been the same, when I left.
He doesn't even know how to dab. He doesn't even know how.
I don't even do that.
You know what? That's probably a good thing. And I would, if I were you, I wouldn't try to come back to the American mindset, because, like you said, you have a very unique perspective that the vast majority of Americans are lacking. And so I'm really glad that we're having the opportunity to talk to you, because I think as skeptics, as I think we all can call ourselves, we kind of, when we hear these stories and they're not firsthand, we're so quick to say it's a false flag, or it's not real, or that didn't really happen. We were talking before the show about hearing the stories of North Koreans who have come out. And I don't know how many times I have had viewers come to me and say, that's not a real story. That's totally made up. That person didn't really come from North Korea. Look at those fake tears. And then you had said to us, I have spoken to these people.
Right.
Absolutely. And like I said, my job in the Army
there's a mix of both, because, I mean, look, in the end, the victor writes the history book, right? So if we've got the biggest and the baddest broadcasting system, we're operating on 50,000 gigawatts, and we can broadcast anywhere. We can definitely put somebody up there who, gives 60% truth and 40% embellishment on how bad it was in North Korea. So, I mean, there are defectors, and I mean, there is the 3-generation punishment and all that. I'm not defending North Korea, but I do not see North Korea as the greatest threat to the United States. I mean,
okay, Nick, can I ask you a question though? Can they even get nukes here? I mean,
so what we're talking about is actually two different things. I think your question is loaded, and the reason I say that is that if theoretically, can they attach a device which would involve some kind of nuclear reaction and enter it into orbit and then re-enter from orbit into the United States contiguous landmass or any of our territories or outlying states outside the contiguous in the United States? Yes, possibly. What they've done in the last week and a half, they've gone and overflot basically the air defense intrusion zone of Japan. They have overflown that at such a high altitude that it could not, justifiably be considered that they were violating Japanese airspace. and they put the missile on a heading to go towards, Guam.
Right.
It's speculation right now. We have contingencies in place to look at that, whether it's an Aegis system that we have circling in the South Pacific and across Japan with their own components of the Aegis system. Ballistic missile defense is something that.
But I mean, I got to interrupt you. You really have to consider the fact that this dude considers Guam as a prime American target. That's going to be, the blade into the belly of the infidel.
There's a reason for it. I will tell you why that is, Michael. I will tell you why that is. And the reason is because any time you see on the news B-52s flying over the Korean Peninsula, which happens with more frequency and regularity now, those depart from Guam. And the reason this is a show of force is designed to say that if you are denied your forward staging area for a strategic nuclear bomber, which is what
he denies us our forward staging area, I'm sorry for every innocent North Korean that had nothing to do with it.
Well, and that's basically
they're
that's what it comes down to.
They're going to get 1952'd.
Yeah, then that's what it comes down to. So when you take a look at it, and the question was, do you believe that some of these folks are legitimate? Do you think that they have the capability? It's a mixed bag of answers. Some of the North Korean defectors are legitimate. I personally have spoken to them. Yes, can't say what was said, can't say who they were, can't say where it was, but I can tell you that yes, there are people that not only defect from North Korea, but when there are people that also defect from North Korea, they do everything they can to get back, because what they experience upon their integration into South Korea, they're such backward thinking in their mindset. They're not capable of having the relationships and the interpersonal relationships with South Koreans that they could have in North Korea with their own people, because it's a different dynamic. Whereas South Koreans are very much a democratic society. They believe in capitalism. That's not the mindset that North Koreans grow up with. They grow up with a collective state. And whereas people all work for the same goal. Nobody is better, nobody is worse unless you're the ruling class. And as a matter of fact, everybody can be worse. When it comes to what they say upon arrival, they're very shocked at the level of sophistication of what's going on in Seoul. Seoul is known as the miracle on the Han. For your reference, the Han River is the major waterway that bisects the city of Seoul. City have 13 million people at last estimate. The capital of Pyongyang in North Korea has about 4.25 million people. So it tells you right off the bat that there is a distinct difference between the two countries that have been at war largely since 1950.
There's other numbers that come into it. I mean, the average North Korean soldier is like 7 inches shorter and 40 pounds lighter than his South Korean counterpart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the reason is 4 generations South Korea,
there's
malnourishment.
There's a vehicle, there's a new car for every 5,700 residents of South Korea. In North Korea, it's one car for every 140,000 residents. I mean, part of their war plan is to send North Korean special agents across the Yalu River into China to steal grain. I mean, they can't afford, they don't have the capability to feed their people 3 meals a day. So they've resorted to state production of methamphetamine as a food adjunct. And I'll tell you what, you blow a couple rails and you're out there working for the Juchi.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, so you have we talked about this idea of self-reliance.
It's not communist. They
actually are. They follow their own ideology, but they are a hybrid form of communism. Right. They take elements from the Chinese communists. They take elements from the Russian communists. They are a hybrid. And one of the things that really on a par with them, the only other nation in the world could be Cuba that has the nepotistic dynasty that North Korea has.
Yeah, the difference, I think that, you were talking about the difference. You were talking about throwing some iPhones and little Debbies into North Korea, is that North Korea is definitely more isolated than, say, Cuba. Cuba has, we have, sanctions on Cuba and things like that, but there are international travelers that come from around the world to visit Cuba. And
Absolutely.
so they're exposed that way. But in North Korea, they're not even allowed to, I guess you can't watch television. People get executed for watching television.
If you watch a South Korean drama in North Korea and you are found out, you will be executed as well as 3 generations of your family.
Yeah, and
they don't execute 3 generations; they just keep.
No, they will imprison the three generations. Yeah, they'll execute you right off the bat.
I was listening to a young woman, and she said it was 4. She said 4 generations, 4 touchings, and she said that execution would be if you were to try to leave the country. So it was really interesting. I don't know if you noticed when I was watching a lot of these defectors, they tend to actually still have these kind of odd, pleasant dispositions when they're like kind of almost giggling about the fact that, you will be executed if you try to leave the country.
Because they've been so desensitized.
It's not
that. It's not taken as seriously as you and I would view it.
Exactly.
No. And you got to also remember there's a different mindset when it comes from Eastern perspective on the value of a human life. Right. The Chinese have a different perspective of it. When does a child actually become a child? And it's sometime around the first birthday.
I think it's about 9 months, I think is
right. The first 9 months don't count
after birth. Yeah.
Right.
So when it comes to that, think back to the Chinese communist takeover in 1911. With the re-education of folks who were not undergoing the communist ideology right off the bat. Some people have a different memory of the way things happen. Some people, there are plenty of folks who have actually defected from North Korea. One of the guys that is, probably a little bit more well known, his name is Shin Dong-hyuk, and basically he was a guard at a prison camp, and he came out and he said some things in one of his books that have been taken aback. Later on, he said, hey, I might have embellished this and whatnot, but he's basically done a couple stories about some camps. One of them known as Camp 14. These are internment camps where folks are brought. He's had some illustrations that are kind of shocking in his book about the way that chemical weapons were tested on families and families and other folks who were basically marked for death. You got to take a little bit of these things with a grain of salt. What I tend to believe is not somebody who escapes from, say, a prison camp. I expect to have a little bit more credibility when I interview or listen to somebody who is an actual regime member.
Interesting.
If a regime member is leaving, then chances are they were either found out that they were collaborating with some kind of foreign government.
They were watching South Korean TV.
They could have been watching South Korean TV. It happens. And so, like Michael had said earlier, they do face a malnourishment problem. They've had a huge amount of famine, basically due to just large scale agricultural problems. They've had droughts for many years. Production of grains and rice are chronically
and they're
low.
Cut off from the rest of the world. I mean, they don't want to bring in the Kubota people.
No.
Bring in 10,000 tractors, and their people are wondering where do these strange people who look similar to us but have all these wonderful goodies from the outside. They don't want to. They don't want to subject their people to that.
They have something called the Kaesong Industrial Complex, and what that is it's a very large industrial complex that makes everything from iPhones to North Korean memorabilia to fabrics, textiles, you name it. If it can be sold on the open market,
there's a North Korean thimble and spoon factory.
That's basic. That's basically
making shot glasses.
They do, and so the reason I bring that up is because the factories themselves are staffed by North Korean workers. the managers are South Koreans who are visa entries into North Korea to manage the factories. And this is a very often a political chess game, because whenever the North Koreans feel slighted, they'll close the complex.
Before you even get into like cross-border, workers, you have to mention the demilitarized zone, which, that's a death zone. I mean, isn't Camp Humphreys named after a soldier who was killed?
No,
what was the guy with the tree?
So you're talking about the 1976 axe murder incident. This is a captain and a lieutenant. You have Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant William Barrett were members of the American military that were stationed on the DMZ, which is the demilitarized zone, in a city called Panmunjom. It's not even a city; it's just a village. And in 1976, August, they were on a tree trimming detail in order to give a little bit better view from a guard post, an observation point, and they were surrounded very quickly by a North Korean party of about 30 North Korean soldiers, while they themselves had about 13 Korean workers with them, and they were axed to death. This is something that led to the largest tree trimming operation in United States history, with the air cover of B-52s, brigade of special forces,
attack helicopters, tanks.
Yeah, everything. This was Jimmy Carter's contribution to Korean diplomacy. The sad thing is that for somebody who's never really understood, the DMZ itself is a 155-mile wide border that separates both Koreas along the 38th parallel as best as the terrain can afford. The zone itself is 5 kilometers in depth, so you got 2.5 kilometers on either side of the border. Within that border, the armistice calls for only 100 men in the DMZ itself at the joint security area, which is 100 North Koreans, 100 American South Koreans, and then out of those, only 10 may be officers, and they may only have small arms. North Koreans don't pay any attention to that anymore. They haven't paid attention to that since, I want to say at least 98. They've got most of their heavy artillery brought within miles of that zone. They could rain down on Seoul with very little notice, and it would be a 3 to 4 hour barrage that would leave the city of 13 million people pretty much in ruin.
And then not to mention the tunnels.
Well, the infiltration tunnels have been going on since, like I said, that they've been going on since the 70s. They're oddly enough,
we've been fighting them since the 70s.
Exactly, yeah. They actually did use some defectors to actually find some of the infiltration tunnels. They were being detected by seismographs, but they didn't know actually where they were being dug. So, oddly enough, and I'm no engineer, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, but that doesn't mean I know how to, do anything other than blow stuff up. What a very interesting thing that was being done is that the South Koreans, once they started trying to identify where these tunnels were actually taking place, they started drilling holes into the surface of the rock. Because basically what they would do is they drill these holes and they'd fill them with water, so that whenever a North Korean work party was trying to excavate the tunnels, they would set off charges. Well, the pressure would travel through the earth, and you would end up seeing the geyser form from where the water had filled into the tunnel based on the blast. So that's how they started identifying these. Very, very interesting stuff.
No, that is fascinating.
Nick sent me some photos. I don't remember which museum it is, but it was a museum of North Korean devices used to infiltrate South Korea. And
absolutely,
I don't remember what the name of that museum was, and I'd probably mispronounce it anyways. But there were some fairly interesting things, fairly interesting firearms that you don't necessarily see in the West very often. And just some kind of history that and maybe just a political view that a lot of people are not aware of here.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that, this peninsula has been divided since 1953. We were talking earlier about the North Korean propaganda that depicts American soldiers as very big, hook-nosed, and it's funny because that's what they show us as, hook-nosed, round eyes, ripping teeth out of Korean women.
bayoneting
devices,
babies and shoving old men into wells.
Right. And when you hear from people, young people who have left North Korea, that's what they say. They have no concept of anything outside of North Korea. They have no concept of any animals. Like I was listening.
I think they don't even know what a scorpion is. If it's not in North Korea,
they don't know.
So their frame of reference doesn't allow.
Is best Korea.
That part is true. That's the saying. That's the word on the street.
It's what? Just say it again.
North Korea is best Korea.
Yeah, exactly. And these children are actually they're taught these things. I was listening to a TED talk of a teacher who went into North Korea, kind of put herself in that position, and she started to teach the young people concepts of writing essays, thinking for yourself, which they are incapable of doing. To sit down and write a letter to someone. That they're incapable of doing that.
Well, because they're taught that, like, Kim Jong-un, Rocket Man, can read their thoughts.
Exactly.
I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
They're taught that this person is God, and so when they come out of this, they are a bit ashamed to have believed that this man could read their thoughts, knew exactly. I mean, they're taught in school everything that I saw. I mean, I watched a little RT documentary on it too. Everything surrounds the Kims. Everything.
Yeah, that's how their lives happen.
Didn't Kim Jong Il, wasn't he like he scored a perfect hole in one on every round
on the first hole of golf he ever played was a hole in one. Yes.
For the hole in one and
absolutely
and honestly, Kim Jong Il never pooped. That's never once.
You know what? I don't trust anybody that doesn't.
During the revolution, I heard he walked on water. They said he walked on water. One person said
stole that from Jesus.
Walked rode a rainbow. These are things that they actually literally believe. So, I think our heart has to go out to these people who we cannot even communicate with. There's no way. Seriously, we could send a letter in a bottle to the people in Cuba. But there's no way to get information to these North Koreans. I do know that some churches sometimes go in there, but they're forbidden from proselytizing. They're forbidden from telling these people the truth.
Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely.
It's like the weirdest place on earth. It really is, like on planet Earth today.
And Nick had said earlier, I don't know if you said it on broadcast or before we started, but you said that Americans really have no frame of reference to understand the brainwashing of these people.
Right. The only thing that I could probably equate this to would be Jonestown. Think back of the religious ideology and the religious zealotry which led to folks following Jim Jones from Oakland, California, down to Guyana, and allowing themselves to literally drink the Kool-Aid. That's exactly the level of
the problem
brainwashing
is
that
North Korea
occurs.
Doesn't have enough Kool-Aid for everybody.
No, they don't.
Kool-Aid shortage.
Well,
they've had to replace Kool-Aid with amphetamines.
They have. That's actually a state-sponsored form of income generation. That's how they make money. And like I was talking to you earlier about the Kaesong Industrial Complex, all that money that's generated out of selling all that North Korean memorabilia, that all goes to support the regime. If the average American citizen knew how much money we were being blackmailed for in terms of providing rice and staple foods to North Korea on an annual basis, while being forced to endure the threats of nuclear violence, we'd eliminate our government and put a new one in.
Yeah.
Well, but this isn't anything new. I mean, the 94 Yongbon Agreement, Bill Clinton basically gave them the ability to be in the place they are now.
Right, and that's why I said earlier it is the same exact language that Barack Obama used to describe Iran. I'm sorry, North Korea's deal that they had here. It's the same thing years later.
But it just goes to show the agenda. But I mean, you think Barack Obama's a guy, but he's just a puppet.
Oh, absolutely. And when it comes down to
talking points.
When it comes to Korea only matters in the American national conscience. Only matters when we start seeing a president in a leather jacket taking a tour of the DMZ. That's the only time Korea matters.
Right.
Either that, or if your local Korean food store runs out of bibimbap. That's the only time people think about Korea.
Well, you think
I enjoy Korean barbecue.
you would think that maybe I actually appreciate Donald Trump's stance when he talks about trade wars with China. That was one of the things that actually made my ears perk up. But North Korea is China's child. Without China, there is no North Korea. North Korea ceased to exist. And so the Chinese leaders they're more than happy to keep North Korea in this la land brainwashing type infantile mindset.
Well, the thing is that you got to take a look at it from their perspective. They don't really even believe that North Korea is a stable country. In their eyes, I would say that North Korea is a failed state. But what they have is a failed state that serves as a buffer between democracy and their form of Chinese capitalism.
They have 40 million bullet catchers we have to get through before we each shoot 9 Chinamen to win. That's the way it works out. If the United States goes to war with China, every one of us has to shoot 9 Chinamen to win.
Right, but our war with China isn't exactly, and it doesn't have to be a military war.
Absolutely.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's a hidden TED Talk. It's very, very tough to find on YouTube. But it was a Chinese general who defected, and he gave basically a talk on China's view on war and their view of total war. And total war isn't necessarily like the von Clausewitz ideal of total war. Yeah, it's completely different. Everything is war. They sell you an iPod, it's war.
Right.
They deliver chemicals to Mexico to manufacture methamphetamine.
Right.
That's war. The Mexican cartel wars. The RPGs they did not buy those at a Walmart in the United States. Absolutely not. I've checked. I've been to Walmart and asked for the RPGs, and they won't give me one. Those come from China. Those come from They may not be Chinese manufactured. They may be Romanian manufactured or Bulgarian manufactured or something from sometime in the 70s, but they're coming over. The Chinese have large stockpiles of that stuff. And not to mention, the Chinese can build small arms faster and cheaper than anybody else on the planet.
Exactly.
Well, that's because they have the manufacturing that we gave to them. We abrogated our responsibilities in terms of maintaining manufacturing facilities in our country, and we gave that to them in the 1970s.
And it wasn't even that. Continually, every single year, there's another U.S. company that moves to China. My own father's company. I saw my cousins over there taking pictures. And what are you doing? They're going to start a manufacturing company over in China. It boggles my mind, everything made in China going to China, and this whole idea of China actually being this wonderful communist utopia where they have their 1%, they have their elites, and they have. It's just mind-boggling that we even allow this to happen. It hurts me. It's one of my main passions is the fact that we do have. We have any relations with China whatsoever because of their human rights violations, and for unfortunately for America to get on our high horse and talk about Iran's human rights violations.
China.
Huh?
But the United States built China. We backed Mao. We had our American bankers back Mao. The CIA backed Mao.
Well, the CIA backed the regime change in Iran. The CIA backs everything. And was it Donald Trump who said, or who was it that I might get my speeches mixed up, that the Chinese middle class grew while our manufacturing jobs shrunk, and we kind of funded this Chinese boom of middle class Chinamen who actually live, some of them live rather comfortably. Because we buy all their cheap stuff. But
you take a look at some place like Vancouver, Canada. All right, Vancouver in British Columbia. The colloquial name for Vancouver is Hongcouver. they've had, and because it's got so many Chinese immigrants there, they've actually had to start. They've made an absentee landlord law to where if you own a home and you are not a resident of the city, you're not a Canadian citizen, you have to pay a tax as long as that home is unrented, because they're in such a dire housing shortage.
Wow.
And the housing shortage it's all Chinese money that they're coming in. They have to turn dollars, which are rapidly devaluing,
right? Absolutely,
into something physical.
And you just hit the nail on the head.
Absolutely, it's all about the money. It's all about the money.
Taking our devalued dollars and putting it in something that has value. That's why people from, is it Saudi Arabia that's buying up land in Colorado and buying the land from our
and I wonder if you're familiar with this at all, Michael, not to switch to subjects, but a dear friend of ours, her best friend is just kind of come into a massive, ungodly, unthinkable amount of money because the Saudis bought land from her and her family down in Texas. Why should the Saudi Arabians be buying land down in Texas?
Hundreds and thousands of acres.
Hundreds of thousands of acres. Yeah. I could see that. Maybe they want in on the potential fracking future.
Well, this particular land, I think, is for oil. I know they're buying it in Colorado because they're actually growing hay for their animals here so that they don't have to use their own water. So they're actually drawing there's a certain county, I believe, in Colorado that's just up in arms because they're using water from, deep sources to grow hay for their own animals.
Right.
For their own animals to send over. So that is in addition to different countries, different foreign entities,
coming in and taking over.
We talk about China. China, like, pretty much owns all of Hollywood now. Like, every movie has a Chinaman in it. It's like a hero.
Did you ever notice the most recent edition and remaking of Red Dawn originally was scheduled to have North Koreans or Chinese, I should say. They were changed to be North Koreans at the insistence.
Huh.
Now, Red Dawn has a special significance for Nick and I. Red Dawn, the original, came out on my birthday when I think I turned 11 or 12 or something like that. And it's a movie that follows our mindset. I would dare say that Nick and I both consider ourselves to be Wolverines at some point.
That's awesome.
But the remake was absolutely just pitiful and disgusting.
Yeah, I thought it was embarrassing as well.
You got to shoot the guy who's got the tracker in his gut. That's just the way that works out. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, it didn't help that he was a Weasley turd, anywa's.
Not only that, but it's Tom Cruise's black kid. You can't shoot Tom Cruise's black kid. That's just racist or something.
Yeah, you can't be racist. Yeah, but every Hollywood movie has a new Chinaman who is some sort of fantastical hero of some sort.
Well, and not only does every new movie has some sort of Chinese sidekick or something, Jackie Chan's better looking younger brother, but every bad guy is either Mexican or he is Arab. Every bad guy in every movie is, or we're getting back. We're also now, times are changing. We're also getting back to having the Russians as bad guys in movies.
Yeah, you can't. But China is definitely on the no-go zone for bad guys.
Yeah, and they also own us. I mean, we talk about this a lot on Resistance Chicks, but they want to know. They want a record of birth certificates and Social Security cards because they want to know what their collateral for the debt that they own us in so many ways. Not only are we slaves to buying their cheap products, and are we slaves because our corporations are over there.
They spend their money on United States debt, and so they have to spend it on things and that's the same thing with the Saudis. They have all this fake, fiat cash. They're turning it into things of value. They're literally stealing it right from underneath Americans' feet, right and left. And nobody, these are the things that nobody really talks about and nobody brings up to, talk about the land grabs and things like that.
Well, hold on, Michael. Take a look at this.
Third world country.
take a look at this.
Country. Nick, you've been to the Middle East. You've seen that there are countries that have it completely over us. You've been even in Korea, which is we're at war there. South Korea, they have internet everywhere.
Absolutely, and not only that, it's 5 times faster than what we have here in the States.
How come? Yeah. How come I'm still breaking off and then they have quick internet? That's what I want to know.
The answer is very simple. It's actually so simple that most people overlook it. It's a lot easier to build infrastructure from the ground up than to revamp infrastructure that's been in existence since the 1930s. If you have to upgrade your utilities, it's a lot of money versus you can build something from scratch and put it in. I mean, think about it this way: the entire peninsula of Korea was deforested, destroyed. So whatever they're building now, they can put the latest and greatest up, and they don't have to, invest the money into generations worth of utilities. This is. I mean, everything there, at least as I was there, as in 2014, the last time, is 5G LTE speeds on everything, in the subway, in the stations, on everybody's phones. And oh, by the way, their phones over there are pretty cool because you can actually watch TV on the phones, whereas you can't do that here in the States.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's a lot easier. Like I said, it's a lot easier to build up from the ground when you have nothing to upgrade. You're just putting in that system.
Right. That makes sense. That makes total sense. So not to shift gears here, but for our viewers that have been following Michael, who in the chats and stuff like that. So you said that you were using the chainsaw today to clean up from Harvey.
I'm still cleaning up from Harvey. Harvey was like two-pronged. We got wind and a lot of rain, but we didn't flood. And Houston, which is I'd say about 150 miles northeast of me, they've got the flood. And I will say that give me wind damage any day over a flood.
Absolutely.
There are entire subdivisions of brand new 2,000 brand new stick and stucco homes from the low 359s, whatever it is, Quail Ridge Meadows or something like that. And they are armpit deep in sewer water.
Oh, and so my question there, though, is that one of the articles I had read was that only 20% of the damaged homes had flood insurance. What happens to these homes? What happens to mortgages?
That's a very, very good question. And here's something that we have to consider, that every insurance company is a bank in essence. And we already know that the bank controls everything. There is no bullet in any war that is not financed at some point. We look at these insurance companies, and I mean, just in Houston and the greater Houston area, Houston, Galveston, that whole stretch, we're looking at 100,000 houses, 100,000 houses. At the mean property value in Houston, I think right now a house is $222,000 or something like that. 100,000 houses that are total. They are total. And I mean, that's aside from the 150,000 vehicles that are swamped and total. Then, I mean, there's a good amount of people out there that only have the state minimum liability. To be honest with you, I buy my car insurance where the illegal aliens buy their car insurance because it's cheap. I do.
Or you just don't get the insurance at all.
Well, yeah, that was it. That was the old me.
I think we've all done it once or twice.
Once or twice.
Michael knows I'm the good son, so
You are the good son.
I pay the money.
You are legally not allowed to not have insurance.
As a matter of fact, I am not. I have to.
So you're recovering well because you just had the wind damage, but what you're talking about, I think, with the banks, or excuse me, the insurance companies that are essentially banks. I mean, the money's not going to be there.
Well, and what's going to happen if they have to throw out some sort of insurance company bailout, and they have to magically print up $1 trillion? Because I mean, the last one was what, 800 what was it, 800 billion or something like that. I mean,
it depends on whose numbers you look at.
Right. Because we get into that same situation of, the United States debt is, 22 trillion plus. But if we do like regular people math, it comes out to be like 478 trillion. At some point, I think the Chinese, and I hate to bring it back to the Chinese, but they control all the manufacturing. At some point, they can just say, "We're not shipping you, the Santa Claus boat this year. You will get no toys for Christmas." And I mean, we're looking at a situation where Venezuela has just said that they are not going to take, dollars for oil. I'm looking at the watch and I'm counting down until we find Bin Laden. In
Venezuela. But honestly, that won't happen. That will not happen, Michael. We will never invade Venezuela.
Yeah, the whole Venezuelan thing it's funny because our lefty liberal people, it hits them really close to the heart for some reason, and so we actually on our Facebook pages where the liberals like to read, they don't actually listen to us. They like to read what we post.
Sure, of course, yeah.
And which is hilarious to me. So I don't post much on our Facebook page about Venezuela because seriously, I get like 30 comments telling me
it's perfect. It's all working exactly as it should.
Just like Trump's speech today.
Perfect than a rabbit dinner.
Well, here's the thing. I think this might have been said recently.
Are all gone in Venezuela.
Yeah, I think this might have been said recently. That people always say like, "Hey, the problem with communism is that it hasn't been tried and done the right way."
That's what they always say. That's the socialist mantra.
Yeah. So what you have in Venezuela is not that you have a country where socialism hasn't been followed the right way. The problem in Venezuela is that socialism has been followed to the letter, and this is what you get.
And that's exactly what Trump just said in his speech. And Nigel Farage said he had never heard a politician since Margaret Thatcher talk about socialism in such a beautiful
and not
way.
only that, admonish the nations in attendance at the UN, mainly Iran and North Korea. No other, I mean, with the exception of maybe Nikita Khrushchev, who said we will bury you to the United States and sparked a generation of people who were willing to live in fallout shelters, has somebody come before a world body and say, we will utterly destroy you. We don't necessarily want to, but we will.
But we've done it before. We'll do it again.
Do it again. And oh, by the way, back-to-back World War champs wasn't just us. Hey,
dude, I'm serious. Look, we are the only country that's put a man on the moon. We won both world wars, and we have a president in the World Wrestling Hall of Fame. Everybody else uses the metric system. That's just the way it is.
That's it. So the funny thing is like I said, you've got a lot of people, whether they're left leaning, whether they're socialists, whether they're communists, whether they're anarchists, whether they're anti-fascist.
I have to interrupt you right now because the most vocal of the left leaning and the most brash and the Antifa and the people who get out there and the tank battalion for Bernie Sanders. These people do have the absolute worst grasp of history because every communist regime shows that the most vocal, the agitators, the revolutionaries are always the first purged.
That's interesting you should say that. Yeah,
every time. And honestly, like you look at some of these, quote unquote college progressives that just want to come out there and yell and scream and make noise and all that. Not a one of them has read George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia, which is probably the seminal book on anything having to do with any sort of communist revolution. And in it, he goes in. I've read the book several times. He goes into it with just this bounding spirit of he is going to crush fascism and this is a worker's paradise and in the end, he's running for his life because he's not a strong enough believer. And I truly believe that Comrade Cletus and Comrade Jamal will execute the loudmouths that are out there today waving the Antifa flag because they are not dedicated enough to the cause. Because honestly, you can't be dedicated to the cause when you have a $1,000 cell phone and your AirPods were bought on mommy's credit card, and you showed up to the protest in a BMW.
Well, it reminds me of earlier when you were talking about Red Dawn. I mean, we've all seen the movie, and we all do kind of want to put ourselves in that situation. And you do have to ask yourself, if that happens, where would I fall in this movie? And the Antifa people wouldn't fall, you know what I mean, with the heroes. They just wouldn't. They couldn't. They don't have it in them. They would pretty much just surrender.
Yeah, but Hillary Clinton says we're living in Orwellian times now, and that Trump is, basically the big bag fascist, and all we need to do is to start, she literally says this in her book, all we need to do is to listen to the experts, listen to the press, listen to the media, and listen to those in power, and everything will be okay. She literally says that in her book. And Hillary Clinton says it just boggles my mind.
To you. The Ministry of Truth would never lie to you. In that book, there's a section of that book, just a little passage. It's where the hero of that book, Winston Smith, is speaking with his co-worker in the Ministry of Truth, a man named Symes. And they're going over the new dictionary. And Symes is remarking and beaming and proud that the new dictionary this year is 10,000 words less than the dictionary last year. And he says, destruction of language is a beautiful thing. Imagine the day when all communication is a single acquiescing grunt that signifies, your subservience. I comply. That's what they want. I mean, we don't teach kids.
That explains our public school system in one sentence.
Absolutely. We need to breed monkeys that can push the button or pull the lever, and they don't ask why.
Exactly.
They just get their Nutra treat at the end of the day with a little bit of like amphetamine and heroin in it.
Exactly. They just plug us into our movies, our television, and our goodies, and we just wake up every day and work in the
video.
Oh, I hope not. But yeah, there's many that do. It's quite disturbing, actually, what those rap videos can do to one's mind.
So I know warp them in perpetuity.
Nick and I are kind of in an unusual era. We grew up when rap exploded from nothing. And to be honest, I had the LL Cool J album Radio.
Oh, yeah.
It was jam. That was badass. I can't live without my radio.
Oh, of course not. So, yeah. Hey, Michael, we are running low on time. And I know that for the Resistance Chicks, we've got their listeners on the line. We got to go ahead and hit some 4 rules of firearm safety.
Please do.
First rule of firearm safety is every firearm is loaded until you visually and physically inspect and ensure that firearm is not loaded. Rule number 2 is you keep the barrel pointed in and the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Do not cover anything you do not wish to destroy. Rule number 3, know what your target is and know what's beyond your target at all times. And rule number 4, the most important rule, it's also the most fun rule to say, is keep the booger hook off the bang switch until you are ready to discharge the weapon. Keep that finger outside the trigger guard. There are no accidental discharges. Every one of them is negligent because some fool pulled the trigger before he was ready.
And there you go.
And there you go.
All right, so y'all take care of yourselves. You are self-sufficient. You have your own little farm. You're growing your own food. How do you protect yourselves?
So we have a small little arsenal. We do have a small little arsenal. I know you guys use anonymity, so I'm not going to list off the weapons that we have, but we are well prepared and we do know how to use our firearms, including a couple different semi-automatics.
We also have a friend, a male friend who we call our troll, who lives in our basement. So he takes care of the weaponry, our arsenal.
what patriots do.